Okay, in this video we are going to continue with our navigation calculations and finish up the second half of this navigation packet. So let's start with question 11. It says refer to figure 24. So figure 24. Determine the magnetic heading for a flight from Allendale County Airport, Area 1, to Claxton Evans County Airport in Area 2. So they say the wind is from 090 degrees at 16 knots and the true airspeed is 90 knots. Now just to remind you, and just a refresher, we are going to start with true course. We're going to measure that with our plotter. It's our path over the ground. And we're going to correct that for wind correction angle. Once we have our wind correction angle, we will have our true heading. Right? The difference between a course and a heading is wind. We're going to take that, and they asked us here for the magnetic heading. So we're going to correct that for variation, which we find on the isogonic lines on the chart, which I did notice a problem with this question. We'll come back and we'll take a look at it as we go along. After we correct for variation, we'll have a magnetic heading because we're using the magnetic north as our reference point. Now next we correct for, if we go a step farther, we would correct for deviation on the compass correction card inside the airplane, and that would give us a compass heading. Now this question only asks us to go as far as magnetic heading, so we won't need to correct for deviation in this question, but we do need to start with our true course. So the way you'll do that is you'll bring up the figure 24, and they said this is a flight from Allendale County Airport to Claxton Evans County Airport. And if you take your plotter and you measure the direction, your true course, on the chart, I get a true course of about 212 degrees. So from Allendale County down to Claxton Evans is about 212 degrees. So we can come back into our question here and bring out our CX2, and let's do the calculation. So on menu number 4, plan leg, heading and ground speed, we've calculated the true course, or we've measured the true course, 212 degrees. The question says we have a true airspeed of 90 knots. The wind is from 90 degrees, and the wind speed is 16 knots. So when you do this, you come up with a true heading of 203.3 degrees. So we had a true course of 212. With the wind correction, we have a true heading, when we correct that true course for the wind, true heading of 203.3. Next we correct for variation. Remember, east is least, west is best. So you subtract easterly variation or add westerly variation. And when I brought up this chart and looking for the isogonic lines, I couldn't find any of the magenta dashed lines running down here. And it happens to be that this chart has changed, or this question has changed since it was published. So this is a previous chart. This is a piece of information that I didn't provide to you in the class, so you may have had some trouble answering this question. But you can see here the dashed magenta line running here saying we have 5 degrees of westerly variation. So if you take that into account, if we come back in here, right, we're going to add 5 degrees because it was westerly variation. When you do that, you get a magnetic heading of 208.3, and that is the answer. Now if you wanted a compass heading, you would add or subtract any deviation given on the compass correction card, but that wasn't necessary for this question. Question 12, what is the magnetic heading for a flight from Priest River Airport, Area 1, on figure 23, to Shoshone County Airport in Area 3? The wind is from 30 degrees at 12 knots, and the true airspeed is 95 knots. So again, we're going to start just like in the last question, where we started with our true course, corrected for the wind correction, got our true heading, corrected for the variation, got our magnetic heading. That's what we're going to need to do on this one. So let's bring up that figure. Sorry. Bring up that figure, and we're looking at figure 23. And this time we're looking from Priest River, which is in Area 1 right here. and we're going to Shoshone County, which is in Area 3 down here. And if you measure that direction, well, going from Priest River to Shoshone County with your plotter, let me go ahead and get my plotter here. From Priest River to Shoshone County, looks like the direction is about 143 degrees. That's our true course. So we have a true course of 143. Now when we correct that for wind correction angle, you're going to type that into your CX2, and you go ahead and type that into your CX2. It looks like 143 degrees. True airspeed is listed in the question, 95 knots. Wind direction is 30 degrees. And the wind speed is 12 knots. And when you type that in there, you're going to come up with a true heading of 136.3. 136.3. And now we're going to correct it for the variation. And looking again at that chart, we can see this isogonic line running here at 15 degrees and 30 minutes of easterly variation. So we need to subtract 15 degrees and 30 minutes from our amount. So when we subtract 15 degrees and 30 minutes, let me bring back up my CX2, 136.3 minus 15, I'll just say 0.5, is equal to 120.8 degrees. 120.8 degrees. And that is your magnetic heading. Correct that for deviation, and you would have your compass heading, which you would fly on your trip. Question 13. What's the estimated time en route for a flight from Allendale County Airport to Claxton Evans County Airport? The wind is from 100 degrees at 18 knots and true airspeed is 115 knots. Add 2 minutes for the climb out. So on a question like this is a time, speed, and distance question. So we need these pieces of information. They want to know how much time it's going to take. That's what they're asking. So we need to know our speed and our distance. Now, to calculate this, we need our ground speed, which wasn't given. They gave our true airspeed. So if we bring up our CX2, we can correct that in the plan leg heading and ground speed calculation. It wants the true course. On figure 24, let me close this one. On figure 24, and we measured this just a little bit ago from Priest River down to Shoshone County, but just to measure it one more time. That was the question, right? Let me make sure I'm answering the right question here. It was Allendale Airport to Claxton Evans on figure 24. So make sure I have the right figure here. So we're on the wrong page. It's always important, make sure you're using the right figure. So again, from Allendale down to Claxton Evans, we measured it just a minute ago, but we'll measure it again. And we said it was about 212 degrees. I believe is what we said just a second ago. I could actually go up here. 212 is what we said it was. Yep. So we can type that into our CX2, 212. True airspeed listed in the question is 115. Wind direction is 100 degrees at 18 knots. And that gives us a ground speed of 120.5. So now we know how fast we're covering this trip, 120.5. And we can figure out how far it is. If we know how far it is, we'll figure out how long it's going to take. So again, we're going to come in here and we're going to measure the distance between those two airports. And when you measure that distance with your plotter, it is 51.5 miles from one airport to the next. So it's 51.5 nautical miles between Allendale to Claxton Evans. So now we can come in here to our CX2 and figure out the leg time. Distance is 51.5. Ground speed we calculated at 120.5, which gives us a total duration of 25 minutes and 39 seconds to get between those airports. But they told us in the question, don't forget to add 2 minutes for the climb out. So when you do that, it's 27 minutes and 39 seconds, which is the time. 27 minutes and 39 seconds. Question 14, what's the estimated time from Sandpoint to Airport Area 1 to St. Maries Area 4? The wind's from 215 at 25 and the true airspeed is 125 knots. So you're going to calculate just the same as you did on question 13. You need the time, or you're trying to find the time. So you have to figure out what is the speed and the distance. So this is an easy one. We bring up figure 23. And we are looking on this question, we're trying to find the estimated time from Sandpoint to St. Maries. So we're going from Sandpoint here down to St. Maries here. So we need to measure the direction and the distance from this question. So if you take your plotter, you can measure the direction. Direction, the true course, is, put my plotter on the question, and it looks like the true course from Sandpoint to St. Maries is about 180 degrees, not about 181 degrees. So on this question you can come in here and do the heading and ground speed, type in your 181 degrees. Once the true airspeed, so we will say the true airspeed on this question is 125. Wind direction, wind is coming from 215 degrees. And the true airspeed, or the wind speed, is 25 knots. And when you do that, you'll find your ground speed 103.5. So that's how fast you're actually moving over the ground. You're moving at 103.5 nautical miles per hour over the ground, even though you're traveling 125 knots through the air. The wind is slowing you down here. Now we want to know the leg time, how long it's going to take. So we need to know the distance, and we haven't measured that. But if we bring back out that diagram and we measure the distance between the two, it's 54 nautical miles. And so you can type that in here, 54 nautical miles. And it already brought forward that 103.5 that we had from the question here. We said it was 103.5 ground speed, which gives us 31 minutes and 18 seconds. And they don't ask us to add any time to this question, so that is the answer. It's 31 minutes and 18 seconds. Question 15, determine the magnetic heading for a flight from St. Maries Airport to Priest River. I'm not going to do the whole question this time. I've done this one quite a few times. Just to remind you, what you do here is measure, on this question, measure the direction from St. Maries to Priest River. So you measure the direction from St. Maries up to Priest River, and to Priest River over here. All right, so we're going to measure from St. Maries to Priest River. Once you measure that direction, you need to correct it for the wind in your flight computer. So you go into your heading and ground speed menu, you'll type in the information given from the question. You've measured the direction. You're given the true airspeed. You're given the wind direction and speed. That can correct for the wind correction angle. That brings you from true course for the wind correction angle back to true heading. And then you type in, or you correct for the variation, looking for those isogonic lines on this chart. And again, the isogonic line says that we have 15.5 degrees of variation. So when it's easterly variation, so you're going to subtract it. So when you do that, you will come up with the magnetic heading. Question 16 asks you to do the same thing, find the magnetic heading. So you're going to have to measure true course, the wind correction angle, to type that into your CX2 and get your true heading. Correct that for variation, and that's going to give you magnetic heading. And on the question, they don't have the isogonic lines on the chart. They gave you the variation here in the question. Question 17, what's the estimated time en route? So this is, again, a time, speed, and distance question. From St. Mary's Airport to Priest River. I feel like we keep going to these airports over and over again. It says the wind is 300 degrees at 14 knots. True airspeed is 90 knots. Add 3 minutes for the climb out. So you're going to do this the same way. You need to find out what is your ground speed. How fast are you going? And the way you'll do that is to type in all the information on the heading and ground speed calculation. Type in, you have to measure the true course with a plotter on figure 23. So you measure the true course between those two airports with your plotter, type it into your CX2, and then put in the rest of the information from the question. They're going to ask for the true airspeed, the wind direction, the wind speed, and then you'll come up with your ground speed. Once you have that ground speed, if you measure the distance, if you know what your ground speed is and you measure the distance, you can type that into your CX2 in the leg time and find out how long it's going to take. Just don't forget to add in that extra 3 minutes for the climb out. Question 18, what's the estimated time en route for a flight from Claxton Evans County Airport to Hampton Varnville? The wind is 290 degrees at 18 knots and the true airspeed is 85 knots. Again, they're asking for the time. So we need to know the speed that we're traveling over the ground and how far it is to get from one airport to the next. And I can work this one real quick since it's been a couple since I've worked a problem. So looking at this one here, it's figure 24. We go to figure 24. And it said we are going from Claxton Evans County Airport, which is in Area 2, right down here. And we're going to Hampton Varnville, which is in Area 1. So we're traveling over here to Hampton Varnville Airport. So we'll use our plotter and we'll measure the direction so we know what the true course is. Because to find the ground speed, to find out what that speed was for this time, speed, distance question, we have to know first the direction and how much the wind is going to affect our flight over this course. So figure 24, and it looks like the true course from Claxton Evans to Hampton Varnville is 45 degrees. 45 degrees. True airspeed given from the question. Let's pop this back up. True airspeed is 85 knots. Wind, it says, is from 290 degrees at 18 knots. And that gives us a ground speed of 91 knots. We have a ground speed of 91 knots. Now the distance between those two airports measured with a plotter is 51.5 miles. So using my CX2, I can go into the leg time menu under plan leg and tell it the distance was 51.5 miles. We're traveling at 91 knots, so it's going to take 33 minutes and 57 seconds. This is 33:57. Now, it also said in the question, don't forget to read the full question, add 2 minutes for the climb out. So when you do that, this is going to be 35 minutes and 57 seconds. All right. Number 19, determine the compass heading for a flight from Claxton Evans County. We haven't done compass heading yet. So this one, again, we've got to start with our true course. As we've done for all these direction questions, we've got to measure on figure 24 the direction between these airports, the true course between these airports. So we're looking at Claxton Evans down here up to Hampton Varnville. which we just measured a second ago. Just to remind you, it was, what did we say it was? Pull back up our CX2 and go back into the flight menu. We measured it 45 degrees from Claxton, Evan County to Hampton Varnville. So we've got that direction. True airspeed on this question. True airspeed is 85 knots. Wind is 280. And it's 8 knots. And when you do that, you get a ground speed of 89.3 and a true heading of 40.6. So now we've corrected our true course to true heading. Now we're going to take that and correct it for the variation on this question. And again, I apologize, you wouldn't be able to do this without the proper chart. I needed to give you the right chart here. You're looking at 5 degrees of westerly variation. Should be, this is an older chart and it was just my fault. I'll give you the right chart. I won't put this question on the test when it comes time. So again, that 5 degrees of westerly variation, we add that in there. And that takes our true heading, 40.6, and brings it up to 45.6. So now we have our magnetic heading at 45.6. And the last thing we need to do is correct for deviation. And we'll get our compass heading when you correct for deviation. So the way you do that is you bring out, it says here figure 59. So we're going to have to jump way ahead here. Figure 59. Let's bring that one out here. Here we are, figure 59. And just a second ago we said we had a magnetic heading of 45.6, and it looks like, according to this chart, 45 isn't listed, but they list 30, they list 60, and each time they're either subtracting 3 if you go from 30, or they're subtracting 4 if you go from 60. So we'll split the difference, say we'll subtract 3.5 from our 45.6, and when we do that, when you subtract 45.6 minus 3.5, you get a compass heading of 42.1, and that is the answer for this question. 42.1 degrees is your compass heading. Question 20, what's the estimated time en route? Again, you're solving for a time, speed, and distance question. And they've given you some extra information here. They've given you magnetic variation, but that's actually not very important to solve how long it's going to take. It will be important if you're going to try and figure out the magnetic heading or the compass heading, but for a time, speed, and distance question, that was just extra information. Figure 21, what's the magnetic heading for a flight from Sandpoint? This one, you're going to magnetic heading, so you will need to know what the magnetic variation is. That would be important. The last question, that was an extra piece of information, and this one it's not. So make those corrections here. Take your true course measured with your plotter from Sandpoint to St. Maurice. When you measure that, correct it for the wind. Correct true course for wind correction angle, and you'll get true heading. Correct that for the variation, and looking at that particular question, looks like how much variation do we have? Looking at figure 23. So figure 23 has 15.5 of degrees of easterly variation, so we'll subtract that, and that will give us our magnetic heading, and that's all they asked for here. We don't have to pull out that compass correction card again to go the rest of the way to compass heading. So hopefully you don't have any questions, but if you do, don't hesitate to email me and ask those as you're going along and answering these. I'm sorry those two problems in this set didn't have the variation listed, but hopefully that gets you squared away, and I look forward to seeing you when I come back. Thank you very much.